Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 3 of BaD TeaCHER podcast. Glad you're back. I wouldn't be a bad teacher if I was in a day late and a dollar short. I am trying to make that Friday deadline. I really am. I want you guys to subscribe and like to the channel. If the more subscribers, then I can go live. I can do some other stuff. But right now, it's just me. And if some guests want to come on, make sure you email badteacher319@gmail.com. I would love to have you on to talk about these topics, any topic. If you have something that you want to talk about, I'll totally change up my plans and wait for the following week for my stuff. I'm just trying to line up some guests right now, and that takes some time when I'm doing this, outside of the capitalist system for the frizzy. So yeah, let's get going. And thanks for your flexibility as I start getting this going. As you can see, the background's different. That's because shout out to my friend. I subbed a lot last week. I was real tired. That's why I did it. I did the episode actually. But it was too long. And I was like, man, I don't even have time because my friend graduated. So shout out to her. She looks beautiful at her graduation, walking across that stage. I can't wait until it's my turn. So yeah. And then I am now out of town for work. And so I wanted to kind of platform Mark Lamont Hill real quick because he's the reason why I'm doing this in the hotel, because I was like, man, that's grind. Like that's straight hustle right there when he would work in the hotel and he would still give us night school. I love night school. I'm a fan. So if you guys want to watch it, it's on YouTube. Great. It's a great analysis of current events and pop culture, etc. But he taught me that you can still learn a lot from somebody, even if they're in a hotel room. So here I am in this hotel room, putting in this work. I worked with a bilingual school in Iowa today, doing some professional development. Again, drop in the comments what type of professional development you like, what type of professional development you don't like. I'm trying to hear something. I'm trying to see something. So let's get us going. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to start up a little bit with like what's in the news, and then we're going to go to Marx, the commodities. So it's all about the commodities today, but we're also talking about operations of capitalism that work to, amplify the profit through the commodity and through our labor. And so we will talk about that, and then how that emerges or shows up or manifests in the education system. So let's do it. Let's do it. All right. So I want to start reading in Lak'ech. It was written by Luis Valdez in 1971. And I just wanted to, we amplify that collective conscious. I think we tend to think of, especially in the capitalist system, as this like rugged individualism. We make good decisions or we don't, and that equals success or failure. And we forget about how collectively we work to oppress and take away opportunities from the most marginalized people in a society and even in our own communities. And how, if we think in a collective conscious, that helps us to understand the interconnectedness of us all, and but also that type of consciousness can be a positive thing and it can benefit humanity in general instead of like more negative. You're mind washed or you're thinking like the herd, you're a sheep, trying to invert that a little bit. Tú eres mi otro yo. Si te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí mismo. Si te amo y respeto, me amo y respeto yo. And let's keep working, guys. Let's keep working together and making sure that we are talking about Indigenous cultures, amplifying Indigenous voices in education, and not letting capitalism destroy plurality in communities. In the news, Rutgers disinvests biotech CEO Rami Elgundor as graduation speaker for speaking up on pro-Palestinian rights and Palestinian liberation. I have in the comment section a film that he produced, The Voice of Hind Rajab. I highly recommend that you watch it. I don't have a good word. It's moving and it's terrible. It's a great production. It's a beautiful thing artistically, but it gets you going emotionally. I just wanted to warn you about that trigger. It's very sad. It's about a little girl who gets stuck in a car. Her family around her is dead. They were killed by the Israeli Offensive Forces, also known as the IDF, and they're trying to get her. And so it's like the dramatization as the dispatchers and how they tried to get her on the back end of it, but the voice is actually hers. So it's genius artistically. And they disinvited him because a few students, Zionists, complained. Um, Iowa's Governor Reynolds signed into law an extra $1,200 per student for vouchers. And now the University of Northern Iowa can accredit these schools where before, accreditate, excuse me, where before the state of Iowa and the Board of Education had to be the ones to accredit. So that facilitates the increasing privatization of schools in Iowa. This is another place I want to hear your comments, not only professional development, but also how are vouchers and privatization of schools showing up in your state? I know there's a little bit more of a tradition in it in other places, especially urban, condensed, packed areas. But this is pretty new for us in Iowa. And so, and I'm interested in the nuances, like not as like only good or only bad, but why is it that so many parents love to hear school choice and want their kid to have a better education rather than saying like, oh, this public education is this panacea and it works for everybody. We don't know why on God's green earth people would want to leave. Because this is causing major budget problems in the state of Iowa because there is like an exodus from the public schools. So I'm interested to see how that shows up. Reparations at Georgetown in 2022, the Jesuit Catholics promised $400,000 a year in reparations with a total of, they pledged somewhere in the millions, and then their goal is $1 billion for reparations. And why I think this is important, and again, why I would be critical of it, do that work and do your research on it. But for this show, we're really going to focus on the commodity today. But I just wanted to say that this is a spark, right? This is how it happens. These private institutions or these Catholic Maryland Jesuits that enslaved and sold 272 people in 1838 are trying to repair that harm and repair that damage and repair that wealth that was and the families that were damaged because of this. And this is a model for larger movements of reparations in private and public sector and at a federal level. The goal is being reparations at a federal level. So that's why I wanted to share that story. I wanted to update on Mahmoud Khalil, who is the one in this right here, who's, let's go. He's a Palestinian activist, and he was at the University of Columbia, and he was a leader in the acampamentos that were outside of the university. And he was arrested and detained by ICE agents that were not in uniforms while his wife was pregnant. And he was released months later. I can't even live a week without working. I can't pay my bills. So I can't imagine the hardship that placed on the family, not to mention the lawyer fees and all of that. And then from our perspective of like paying taxes, like all those resources that are just going down the drain because now he is appealing this and Trump saying that Trump like fast tracked it, was making an example out of him. And again, under even United States legal jurisdiction, he was here legally, had the F-1B visa. And there's more information in the comments. But I just wanted to update you that he is appealing and he is fighting and he is, not giving up. And that gives him a little bit longer because they're still trying to deport him. I mean, they've been trying to deport him to the Congo, to Algeria. Who knows what's true, who knows what's not true. But follow that case, support him any way that you can. And in the comments, there is a YouTube video of when he was arrested and just, ugh. And then I wanted to share some of the ICE protocol, thinking of this and thinking of being community and learning from Minnesota, Minneapolis mainly, St. Paul, and then even the active responder training that I've gone to here in my local community. They say that you can record them. You have the right. Your First Amendment right is to record. You should ask them for their badge number. You should ask them for their name. And then with that recording that you have, you can take it to a local organization or a state level organization that you know of And that's better than posting it directly to your social media, because they can make the decisions and get it to the right people so they can identify that person that was disappeared, which is the most important. And sometimes that static and that noise on social media gets in the way of that. And so just trying to be more strategic in how we are disseminating disappearances by ICE. And again, there's other ways to do it. I'll leave that up to you. I just wanted to share that protocol with you. And now let's really get to the meat of what we're doing today. And that is talking Marx, right? Talking, what does Marx say about the commodity? Last week, if you remember, we talked about what Marx says about the division of labor and the importance of the surplus value in a capitalist society, and how that hierarchizes labor, so where one person can be the same value as 5 or even 300. And then the division in a capitalist system, the division of the employer, which is like your, 1 to 10%, give or take, and then the rest of everybody else, like us. So again, there might be some employers on here watching, highly unlikely, because that ain't us. Yeah, we the teachers, we're the workers. And even as a district leadership, you're still an employer. You employ people, quote unquote, but you don't own that entity, right? Unless it's a private school. That's why that's problematic, and I'm willing to hear, and we're going to have episodes on that too. So anyways, the commodity, what is that? What does Marx say that is? And thinking of, putting all the pieces together, and how that commodity, like what value does the commodity have, and how do we place value, and how is value kind of imposed on us in these certain commodities. Like, I'm thinking of, like, we're told what we need, even, and thinking in nature, maybe it's not natural that we need that. And, that's what Marx says that capitalism does, is they take what is natural, distort it, invert it, still say it's natural, and it's in fact actually not natural at all. And it's also socially relevant, socially relevant. That's why we focus on the social. That's why we want to focus on how this stuff manifests in particular in the education system. And so I was worried about how to describe commodity, because it is complex. But then I was like, you know what? Just like look around. Like, commodities are everywhere. Commodities are, this is a commodity. This alarm clock is a commodity. This cell phone is a commodity. Everything, and it doesn't have to be only physical commodities, even though that's the original idea of a commodity. You barter, right? I have this one shirt and I think it's equivalent to your pair of shoes. Is it a deal? Oh no, I think that I want 2 shirts for these one pair of shoes, and this is why. And that is a little bit different than what capitalism is, because capitalism made that personal, private type of exchange into a larger system where all the other commodities are working in relationship with other commodities. And what gets obscured in that is we are told, or what seems natural to us, is that this commodity has this value, this inherent value, and that's just how much it's worth, and that's just how much it is. And when we think about the operation of reduction, which says that everything that is complex in this complex system gets reduced into the simple, and then once those commodities are reduced, or the system is reduced into the simple, or compartmentalized, everything has a value objecthood. So we preserve and respect the value hood. So, that's like the idea that I may drop a shirt on the ground a lot quicker than I'm going to drop a phone on the ground. Why? Because I also live with that sense of value hood of these certain products, as some having more value than others, mostly based off of money, but also based off of the need or the necessity. But will a shirt break? No. Will I lose out if I ruin a shirt versus a phone? No. And again, where does that come from? And that reduces the complexity of like all the moving parts that got this phone in my hand, and all the natural resources and the minerals and the people and the labor force that was exploited. And so the main idea of this commodity is it's the, when it's exchanged for money. So when we have an equivalent that's based off of all other commodities. So it's like, $5 equals not only this shirt. $5 is also equivalent to candy, to pop, to maybe your Starbucks, maybe not. In boycott Starbucks, no. If there, if and I believe that there's some valid argument to boycotting Starbucks for the boycott divest movement, for Palestinian liberation, but that $5 is so your labor value is lost in this exchange. Where's the labor at? And that's the labor of it is the only way that the employer is even making money, because you have to turn all of these products into that commodity. They don't just, pop up and shine. You have to, this is plastic. This was a human created material for this to make money, for the employer to make money off of this, despite the harm that it does because it's not biodegradable. And so again, like if the commodity is something that is everywhere, and look around. And how does this show up as a service? And something that I've been thinking about when I'm thinking about commodity, it's like in education, our bodies, our knowledge, our brain is the commodity that's exploited. And that just becomes so much more important to me, because it feels like then I have like, I'm a stakeholder in overthrowing this. And we always talk about teachers are underpaid and overworked. And it's like, yeah, and what service do we provide? And we're told that we provide like we're the great equalizer. We provide an education for our students. But if we think about the commodity, we don't really get decisions on what chairs to buy, which is a commodity. So we're using our constituents' tax dollars to buy these things, and these companies make quite a bit of money off of this, especially if, they strike a deal with many, many districts. The computers, like the ridiculousness of buying all these Chromebooks, and then 3 years later, some teachers are saying, no, we don't want Chromebooks anymore because they're not what's best for learning. And so just think of how Google still made all that profit off of our tax dollars, for it to not be what was best practice anyways. And so, the service of perpetuating the capitalist project is also part of the commodity that schooling is in the United States. So it's really convenient for the employer that their parents can work for them to make money, and then you can teach them how to live and be successful in a capitalist system. And then how that like inverts all of like, what it obscures racism and marginalization and oppression. So the victim gets blamed for their own oppression or for their own inability to be up on the upper echelons of the hierarchy in a capitalist society because you didn't work hard enough. And that has been reinforced through schooling through, 12, 14, all the years. And so I'm thinking about like, wow, that's really convenient that they made this project, and that they is vague. I'm well aware of, please criticize me on that. But what I mean is the capitalists. The capitalists have this project, and I know it's more messy than saying like, oh, they were in the room conspiring, but every decision that these people make, whether they're in the same room or not, is for profit. So for me, it doesn't really matter that they weren't all together, or they weren't conspiring in this like malevolent, explicit way, but that's the point. I'm not talking about individual evils as a person. I'm saying as a system, it breeds this type of behavior. So it breeds this type of like, oh, we have this industrialization in the United States. And when we have this increased industrialization, we also have an increase in public education. And then when industrialization, is at its peak, public schooling becomes mandatory. So they kind of go hand in hand. And we don't lie about school preparing you for society. But if the society is a capitalist society, then we're not preparing you to be successful. We're preparing you to play your role. And that's how we get that perpetuation of disproportionate people in prisons. So disproportionate amount of African American people in prisons than in the population. That's how you get a disproportionate people of Black and brown and poor white people in the same jobs that their parents were, despite the fact that we're told that we have choice and that this is not a caste system. But again, it's really by design. So I don't know, we could argue like, is it a broken system or is it a fully functioning system? Because it does produce workers. School produces workers. And we even have tech school now to produce even more workers. And thinking of reduction and breaking the complex down into the simple, we don't really know in schools, like when they buy the curriculum, we don't know how much the curriculum cost. We kind of sometimes make decisions as a professional learning community on which curriculum we like more, but ultimately one person has that decision. And then that articulation piece, we don't really see the whole, right? We don't see what happens in first grade. We don't know what happens in second grade. If we're in the middle school and if we're in the high school, we're even more distanced from that. We don't even see what happens sometimes like in an English class. I don't even know what's happening in social studies or what's happening in science. And even the idea of like courses and separation of science and compartmentalizing social studies is something that is not necessarily based off of nature. It's based off of a way to organize knowledge. And again, not always am I criticizing everything when I'm talking. I'm just getting us a way to think of like, how does the system work actually, materially, and trying to make it more of a complex whole for us to think about in order for transformation. And so, I want us to keep thinking about this and then moving on kind of to some of the operations of it, more operations like your fetishization. Well, that is the fetishization of the commodity, because it's the commodity that is going to make that surplus value for you. It's going to make that increase that profit. And like, so it's like, sometimes you notice, like you buy new makeup, maybe not, this is just me, but you buy a new product, you like it. And then the next time you buy it, it doesn't work as good. It's like more watery. It's like, yeah, that's this like example of how to constantly try to increase profit through this commodity, even though you're not paying your workers anymore and you're not you're harming the consumers a little bit more. And the fact that like now the product doesn't work for them. And they may keep buying it. We don't know, or they may keep searching for another one. That's kind of the risk of the game in capitalism. And so this is that like fetishization with the commodity. And what gets lost in this and obscured is we tend to think of this commodity as having this value and it's worth this much in relation to all the other commodities. But in that reduction, we forget about the labor force and we forget about the natural resources of where it comes from. And we forget about that's people's land and that's people's labor force. And I think that's the most important part to think about when we think about the value of something. And the employers don't want us to think about that without our labor, that commodity there would be no value to that commodity. So without somebody fracking that oil, it doesn't matter how rich you are. And it doesn't, again, that's what's so scary right now with AI is like it seems like what was his name, Giannis would call techno-feudalists. But these tech guys in Silicon Valley, it seems like they are more and more okay with just like getting rid of humanity at all. And like, I heard they were hiring robotic dogs to provide security for these data centers. So it's like, they also now want to get rid of us as a labor force because they have to pay us. So this is that fetishization of the commodity to the point where like they want a robot to be able to produce these products to increase that surplus value. And then they say we can just write poetry and like live a good life, but we still have questions, right? Like, I don't trust you guys with my life like that. And so I want us to keep thinking about how this shows up in our schools, how this shows up in the way that we make decisions, what we know, what knowledge we teach, what knowledge we don't teach, why, starting to ask us these types of questions. And then what role does our service play in capitalism and how these can all work alongside each other? So in a capitalist state, Richard Wolff always says this isn't mutually exclusive. And it's not that other forms of economic exchange or even spiritual exchange aren't coinciding with the capitalist state. But because we are living in a capitalist state, the project is to perpetuate capitalism and continue to increase profit. And we see that. And I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the graph from even from 1970, I mean, this is like savage capitalism, even in the last 50 years. We're not talking ancient history. And in fact, capitalism is still pretty of a new thing, really starting to surge in the 1800s with the colonialism and imperialism of Europe and the enslaving of African American or African people, and also occupying their land. But the graph of the United States goes like this. So we're in the 70s, the wealth gap was this, and now in 2026, the wealth gap looks more like this. And so capitalism has not gotten us, that has not decreased that wealth gap. And in fact, it's done quite the opposite. And it does cause these economic crashes like in 2008 that people have not really recovered from. And now we're living in another economic crisis where we all of a sudden have fees that we've never had before. We have surveillance that we have never had before. But they tell us that it's for convenience, or they tell us it's for our security. And I'm even thinking about how security is commodified in institutions. So like the dual authentic factor. And we use Duo at our university, and that's new. And so somebody is making money off of that. Like somebody made the decision to buy that product for the profit of that company. And I didn't ask for that. I didn't think that anybody wanted to hack into my work account and look at what articles I've saved or what poems I've written. I don't know. How do you guys feel? Security or surveillance? And even thinking about how the voices of the kids that were harmed by social media or Snapchat, they took their own lives because maybe somebody told them to, or they've gotten into drugs because they were buying them on Snapchat. And we just, we don't think about how people are making money off of that. And then when they elevate these voices, and because the parents are saying like, no, we want justice. And now they're using this, even though it seems like Facebook lost, or they lost some sort of lawsuit. Now they're using this to provide more security for everybody. Seems kind of suspicious. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Tune in next time. We're going to talk about socialism. We're going to define it and talk about ways that it already shows up. I want to know what you're doing, and then ways that we can transform it into more of a socialist type of project, and where we're kind of trying to break down those hierarchies and break down that way we understand value of like teachers or like administrators being worth triple the amount as one teacher, or superintendents being worth 8 people in the system. And so I want to keep thinking about it, but I want to always start off with the definition and a good foundation. And shortly we'll have some guests on, and I'm super excited for that. I'm super excited to keep talking, and I will see you on Friday. Cross your fingers, 4 p.m. Thank you. Take care.